It began as a whisper on the plains, just another morning in Colorado territory. Children played near the creek. Women prepared food, men sharpened tools and told stories by the fire. Then came the thunder, not from the sky, but from hundreds of hooves, soldiers, rifles, cannons. And within moments, the whisper turned to screams. This is the story of the Sand Creek Massacre, an American atrocity that has been buried, denied, and sanitized for over 150 years. But the blood still stains the soil. The ghosts still speak. And once you know what happened, you'll never forget it.
Before the massacre, the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes were trying to survive in a land that was no longer theirs. Treaty after treaty had pushed them into smaller and smaller tracts of land. In 1864, amid rising tensions between settlers and plains tribes, many Cheyenne and Arapaho, under chiefs Black Cattle and White Antelope, sought peace. They camped near Sand Creek in southeastern Colorado. Black Cattle flew an American flag above his teepee, believing it would offer protection, as promised by U.S. officials. There were around 700 people in the camp. Most were women, children, and elders. They believed they were safe. But far from the camp, a political storm was brewing. Colonel John Chivington, a former Methodist preacher and Union hero from the Civil War, had his own agenda. He wanted to eliminate what he called the Indian problem and boost his political career. The Colorado governor, John Evans, supported harsh action. Settlers were frightened by scattered raids and lumped all native groups together, even the peaceful ones. Newspapers called for extermination. Some soldiers were told that native women and children were the breeding ground for hostiles. Colonel Chivington formed the 3rd Colorado Cavalry, many of whom were poorly trained and eager for revenge, not justice. They set out not to defend settlers, but to make a statement. At dawn, on November 29, 1864, around 775 cavalrymen rode toward the camp at Sand Creek. The people were still waking up. Some waved the American flag in confusion, thinking it meant the soldiers were friends. But Colonel Chivington gave the order: attack. Cannons fired into the camp. Soldiers charged. Teepees exploded. People scattered, many into the creek, hoping to hide. But there was no mercy. Women holding babies were gunned down. Children were shot as they ran. Men who tried to surrender were butchered. Even Chief White Antelope, unarmed and singing a peace song, was executed. What followed was unspeakable. Bodies were mutilated, scalps were taken. Some soldiers collected genitalia as trophies, male and female. At least 230 Cheyenne and Arapaho were killed. Over 2/3 were women and children. The soldiers paraded body parts through the streets of Denver, and Chivington called it a victory. But not everyone agreed. Some soldiers were horrified. Captain Silas Soule, a Union officer, refused to participate. He later testified against Chivington, calling the attack a massacre of innocents. Whistleblowers followed. Word reached Washington, and 3 separate investigations were launched. The U.S. Congress condemned the attack. Chivington resigned before he could be court-martialed. He never faced punishment. Captain Soule, the man who spoke the truth, was assassinated months later. Black Cattle survived, only to be killed 4 years later in another attack at Washita River, alongside more of his people. For decades, textbooks called Sand Creek a battle. It was not. It was a war crime. The descendants of the victims never forgot. For generations, Cheyenne and Arapaho families passed down the stories. They returned to Sand Creek each year to remember the fallen. In 2005, after over a century of advocacy, the site was declared a National Historic Site, a place of mourning. a place of truth. Today, the massacre is taught in schools. Memorials mark the land. Survivors' names are remembered. But the trauma lingers. It's in the silence of the grass, in the ripples of the creek, in the long shadow cast by a government that claimed to protect, but destroyed instead.
Sand Creek is not just a scar on the land. It's a scar on the soul of a nation. And like all scars, it tells a story, one of silence and survival, of cruelty and courage. The truth behind Sand Creek is not easy to hear, but history demands that we listen. If this story moved you, share it. Let others hear the voices that were nearly erased, because memory is justice, and we owe the truth to those who can no longer speak.